Yeah, welcome to the technical stream session. I'm just going to get my pointer. So my name is Dylan Roberts. I'm the Chief Digital and Information Officer for the City of Leeds, and I'm also the lead on the technical stream and strategy around the Yorkshire Number Care record. And
I'm Robert Higginbotham. I'm a Director of Synonetics, and I'm also the lead technical architect on System of Systems.
And what we're going to talk about today, quick overview. We're going to give an overview of why we're doing the LICRA, certainly from a technical perspective. What is an open platform approach and why are we adopting that? What each organisation has to do to plug in and how we're going to help with that. That's the summary of today's session. There's various guys in the room who are going to be involved in this, supporting it. So there's George at the front. He's the technical lead, and there's John at the front as well, who's the programme manager. And is Ken Eastwood here? Oh, anyway, he'll be good. He's from Doncaster, who's one of our Wave 1 organisations. So, why are we doing the LICRA? Well, the principal reason for doing the LICRA is that in every one of our organisational strategies, these are the ICS strategies and plans, and in the long-term plan, there is a requirement for us to integrate care. Whether or not that's potentially integrating teams working in localities, maybe in a primary care network, which could mean people working in a mental health organisation with people in acute, in the council, and maybe even third sector organisations working in combined teams. There's a need for them to share and view data around patient cohorts or people, or whether it's integrating across the region as a whole. So from a cancer perspective, for instance, there might be patients who are in Scarborough who need to go for tertiary care, for instance, in somewhere like Leeds or whatever, and what we want is the data to follow with them. So fundamentally, all of us have got similar objectives, and all of us are trying to do integrated care, so that the purpose of our LICRA bid is to enable us to do that quicker, faster, and hopefully for less money. But there's a greater ambition in Yorkshire Humber, so part of our LICRA bid was not just about enabling us to do integrated care quicker, but it was also about achieving a greater ambition, and that greater ambition is that the leaders across Yorkshire and Humber in particular want Yorkshire and Humber to differentiate themselves globally in some cases in terms of how they're solving the big issues to do with health and care. So as for instance, I don't know if people know, but there's a lot of discussions and work with government around the industrial strategy. And part of the industrial strategy grand challenges, for instance, are things around how do we address the issues of the ageing society? How do we use AI and data to gain greater insight into conditions and things like that? So from that perspective, one of the key things we want to do in this region is to basically be able to bid for those funds and try and differentiate this region in terms of developing the health tech market, or differentiate this region in terms of the use of data and research across the patch. Now, one of the prerequisites, and that's what government want actually, but one of the prerequisites of our LICRA bid, which is to help enable us to access all of that, is having a LICRA which covers a particular population size. So if you want to be the best for data and research, or bid for some of these grand challenge funds or digital innovation hub or whatever, fundamentally you've got to be at a particular population set, and that was touted at the time as needing to be over 3.6 million. Yorkshire and Humber is about 5.8, I think was mentioned earlier. So that's the other reason and the big ambition for us in Yorkshire and Humber why we want a LICRA and an integrated care record, or the ability to pull integrated data across the size of the Yorkshire and Humber footprint. This is the technical stream, so this is a technical diagram. So in terms of our ambition, our target, should I say, our target is based on this high-level architecture model. And what this basically describes is we're delivering the glue, the integration, which is between all of the different systems we've got here. We want to maximise the investment that people have already got in their existing systems. Lots of investment has been put into systems across Yorkshire and Humber, and there's a myriad of different local systems, whether they're on packages, whether they're in-house written, whether they're cloud-based or on-premise. Our fundamental thing to start with is to integrate and pull data together from all of those different systems. Yeah, so it can be viewed or combined at that regional level for enabling that integrated care and that left shift, whether or not that's at a local place-based level or whether or not it's on the region. But the other key thing about our LICRA programme and about the Yorkshire Number Care record is because we're doing it as an open platform. What we want to be able to do is be able to open up that data with the relevant IG arrangements and provide a platform on which we can start developing new innovations and capabilities on top of it. So maybe a person-held record might be one of the first ones off the block, so we might develop application Q here, for instance, which, because it works to some common standards in the way it's built and the way it integrates, then that can be reused across the region. Applications that potentially could be designed around individual people's needs. There are vendors in the health tech industry, for instance, who are talking to us now around how potentially their apps or their solutions could potentially work, which are designed around maybe managing particular conditions like diabetes or something, but integrate back into this system of systems so that we can potentially as clinicians or whatever see some of that data, and in the same way people can contribute their data. They will do that through this integration infrastructure we're going to talk about today. So yeah, what do we mean by open platforms? Well, we've set a set of clear design principles and standards in all that we're going to do. And in particular, all that we're going to do when it comes to the Yorkshire Number Care record components and capabilities. Yeah? First of all, we know we need to set some open data standards. So at the Yorkshire Number footprint level, if we are linking systems together, they've all got to work to a common data standard and model. We're setting that, and we're doing a lot of work in terms of determining the 5 profiles and the like around that. What we're saying is anything we build or do in Yorkshire Number and the Yorkshire Number Care record is based on open requirements and business cases. Anything that happens across this patch or we're involved in, it's openly available for anyone to use, reuse, nationally, locally, whatever. That is the principle. Clearly, we've got to work to open APIs. That's just, I guess, common sense, and in particular, real push jointly with system vendors to do the same. We're going to be working, there's an IG session separate for this, but again, open information governance. So from that perspective, as many common tool sets and models that we can use and reuse across the patch to enable us to deal with some of the information governance aspects and make sure that's openly available for everyone to see and understand. The Yorkshire Number Care record components themselves, a lot of them are built, not bought. So we've got suppliers who are helping us do that, but they're going to be open source components that can be freely and easily availably used across the patch. And then the final thing, which is the point that was raised earlier on, we will have a set of open tools available for citizen engagement. And we say citizen all the time, because I'm from local government originally, but fundamentally it's not just about the patients, it's about citizens more generally in terms of how you engage with citizens in terms of using some of these tools and services. A lot of this stuff just simply links and aligns with national policy. So people know about Chapter 5 of the long-term plan. People might also know about the policy paper which came out in October 2018, The Future of Healthcare, Our Vision for Digital Data, Technology, Health and Care. That in those documents they set some clear standards and guidelines which we as a region, as individual organisations across these regions should be adhering to. And we do, in terms of this particular programme. The other quick point about that is that the message that we're getting, certainly from the centre now, certainly with the NHSX coming into being, is that if you want any money going forward in future, you better be aligned to some of these standards. So I guess there's a bit of a quid pro quo here. I think we need to be doing some of this if we want some of the money to really progress some of the things and the ambitions that we've got. So, how are we doing it? Robert?
Thank you, Dylan. Right, the slide I'm showing you at the moment is where we are now. This is what the Yorkshire Number Care record looks like. Before I sort of talk too much about this slide, I just want to give you a picture as to the architecture, the principles behind this. The Yorkshire Number Care record is fundamentally a group of data providers and a group of data consumers. A data provider, it might be a system, it might be TPP, it might be EMIS, it might be a care setting like Rotherham or Leeds Teaching Hospitals. A data consumer is maybe a user interface, maybe a user interface. It could be other things as well. It could be an algorithm, it could be a population health management platform, which I'll talk about later. We haven't really got a presumption as to what a data consumer is. There is no YHCR user interface. It's whatever user interface can consume the data. Now back to the current state. We've been involved in a pilot process now for maybe 5-6 months. This pilot's involved Rotherham Acute, Doncaster Acute, Humber Teaching, Yorkshire Ambulance Service, Leeds Teaching Hospitals. 5 sort of fairly random locations when you look at the geography of Yorkshire. But what was important to us was to get willing players to come up quickly. We're sort of turning the lights on across Yorkshire. We're trying to make data available quite generally. Now, I know that the light in Rotherham looks quite dim when you're looking at it from Leeds, but as those lights come on around the patch, bringing Barnsley in, hospitals in Sheffield, then things start getting brighter and the richness of the data starts growing. So what we've got at the moment is really a synthetic data flowing between organisations. Each organisation is behaving as a data provider and a data consumer in the main. As a data provider, they expose their data using a standard FHIR standard. It's really important for us that we do adopt sort of common standards across the region. In order to be able to get a data consumer to address one of these data providers and say, give me your data, it's got to know what it's getting. The relationships, they're sort of managed, coordinated by some regional infrastructure. There's not a lot of this at the moment, but it basically simplifies how a data consumer can ask for some data. You can go to one point and say, tell me all about the appointments for this patient. It also sort of controls security, and it ensures there's a secure relationship. And there is the capability of persisting data. I'm about to show you a little bit of a video. This is a user interface. It's just been knocked up in somebody's bedroom, so it's not clinically safe. It's not the YHCR user interface. Don't treat this patient. What the user interface is going to show you is that it's able to address the system of systems as it currently is and pull back an aggregated record for a patient. Now, the record isn't complete in any way. It's, we're exposing what data we can expose, some problems, some encounters with the patient, some drugs. But it's bringing that back and it's joining the data together as a timeline of contact with the patient. I'm going to take you behind the scenes of this user interface, and we'll see how the system of systems is helping it do its job. But at the moment, the user interface is just issuing one query against the system of systems. Give me the patient and tell me everything you know about them.
That's a combination of data from
A combination of data from these sources up here: Doncaster, Humber, Leeds, Rotherham, Yorkshire Ambulance Service. We'll be moving on now. Okay, what you're about to see is an integration engine. So this is what's offering that sort of endpoint that the user interface is talking to. This is InterSystems Ensemble. It's a piece of integration technology that is receiving a request and then farming it out to all the different sources we know about that patient. Each of those lines represents one of those requests going out to Doncaster, Rotherham, wherever. And basically the request is saying, tell me about the patient and everything you know about them. Independently, they come back one at a time and they give us the data. And the data is then aggregated by the user interface. Now, this is exactly the same approach that the Leeds Care Record is using to grab that data, or the Rotherham Care Record. And it can be any user interface. We are thinking about standard user interfaces within the region, maybe offering some sort of model. But there is no presumption as to how you should be viewing the data. The data is all coming back in FHIR format. That's the guarantee that the user interface has got, that it can actually talk to all these systems. It knows exactly what format the data is going to come to it in. That was an aggregated view of the data. What we've just now done is say, drill into one source, just go to Doncaster and just get the data from there. There isn't any presumption as to how you're going to present this data, and I think that many user interfaces view it over tabs. This is just consolidating into a single record. I think as the maturity of these sort of approaches grow, then acceptance of a single consolidated record may become more acceptable. So at the moment, I've just spoken about a YHCR for the purposes of direct care. Population health management is really, really important. We're offering tooling from the YHCR, basically a platform that can be rolled out across the localities, and that platform will offer all the connectivity that's needed to go and grab data from the system of systems. The same source for direct care is the source for population health. This platform can be adopted by locality. It will pseudonymize data. It will provide some tooling for analyzing data. And it will allow data to be moved up to a regional level in an anonymized form as well. So, over to you, Dylan.
Thank you. Yeah, so what does each organisation have to do to plug in? Well, I think in the first instance, the first thing to know is that in terms of all that integration infrastructure, as I call it, all those components in the centre, they, once are built, will be freely available to be used and reused to take a lot of the heavy lifting, I would say, that's involved in doing integration. You just mentioned there about pseudonymisation, anonymisation, identity, and all of that type of thing. But to plug into this, what does an organisation need to do to be able to plug in? And a bit of a technical diagram here, but what we are looking to provide is an on-site fire proxy, a piece of software that is installed locally on your servers and your infrastructure to then integrate with your systems. Now, we can provide this to varying levels depending on what each organisation wants to do. Different organisations have got different capabilities and might want to integrate with the Yorkshire Number Care record in varying different ways. That's fair enough. We can have discussions about but fundamentally, at the basic level, what we want organisations to be able to do is work with us to integrate from their integration engines up into the fire proxy, and in particular, more importantly, do the data mapping from your data models to the Yorkshire Humber data model. Key thing about the fire proxy, clearly it's license free, as is the integration infrastructure that Robert was talking about. It's currently based on 2 platforms that we're developing in parallel and keen to test. There is a capability that works in systems on Ensemble, which is what we've got now running across the pilot sites. We're also developing an entirely self-contained open source approach based on Node.js, which is a product called Qt, which we're also going to be testing on. North Yorkshire Council, I think, being the first to test that one. In terms of the things you need to do, and bear in mind, if you're doing integrated care, or from a technology point of view, if you're doing integrated care, you're going to have to do this sort of stuff anyway. So these are just the key things to think about as either a data consumer or provider. In terms of integrating with your systems, clearly there's some work to be done there in terms of data validation, data structure mapping. The NHS number is key, and is the key, by the way, so just to remind that, especially for local authority colleagues, I appreciate it's a given in the NHS, but in the local authorities it's not to say that all systems have got the NHS number included in it, but that is the key. So there is some work to be done locally, but I guess the point I'd say is that regardless of your level of maturity, yeah, even if your data you feel might be in a mess for sake of argument, well, have the discussion, come and talk to us. We can basically integrate at different stages and at different levels. And as Robert alluded to, the data set can become richer and richer and richer as time goes on. We can incrementally basically add different data sources as we go and help with that work. But again, and I realise it's a bit integration 101, but it's, I guess, quite important. You know, data quality is an important thing when you're doing integration, but that is exactly the same as if you're doing integration locally as if you were doing it on this regional level and using these regional capabilities. So how are we going to help? Well, the first thing, and there's work ongoing at this moment in time where we're defining the detail around this, but there's going to be a Yorkshire Number Digital team. There's going to be a small footprint type of team which post the LICRA programme will be there to support and help people onboard these products and these capabilities, and of course maintain them and keep them going. We have got and we are developing a very comprehensive onboarding pack which will explain all the different things that you need to do, and it's wider than just the technical elements, and John here is the program manager on that, who is developing that pack, and we're testing it in particular with a lot of the Wave 2 sites, and thanks to Wave 1 sites for the learning that you've given in terms of informing that. So there is a complete onboarding pack that we'll have available. We are currently out to procurement for some partners to help with this. So we're putting a framework in place where ultimately organisations across this region, not just the Yorkshire Number Care Record team, will be able to commission sets of organisations who can do the whole soup to nuts really on any project, whether it's an integration project or a digital innovation project, whatever it might be, from discovery right through to delivery and potentially support. But what these vendors will know is they'll know the standards, they'll know the capabilities, and they know how we want to work from an open platform point of view across this patch. So you'll have that assurance in terms of then being able to support you. So again, if there are issues or challenges, there'll be a group of vendors available there, or partners, I'd say, to help with that. And also, as we said before, everything we're doing is open. So all of these, every single component which is part of Systems of Systems, and the fire proxy is document number 3 there, it's all documented, it's all available on the yhcr.org.download. So again, from our perspective, if people and technicians want to get into there, have a look at that, ask any questions or whatever, then please do so. We have got an architecture group, George Hope, who's here, who's part of the team. He leads, he's the primary secretary for that group. He leads and coordinates that. So again, from our perspective, that's got a lot of Wave 1 folk on it at the moment. But again, if people are interested in being involved in ratifying these designs or being involved in these designs, really keen to have more people on board on that, and speak to George later. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the use cases because a lot of the other sessions today is all about that. But we're conscious of the fact that there are lots of use cases, and there's use cases coming out all the time. The capability we've put in place, or we've developed, is a generic capability that can potentially be applied to multiple use cases. But as things are developed and those use cases land, everything that's around those use cases, from North Yorkshire Council, for instance, that's got to be documented into consistent formats and will be available to be shared, and anyone else can use that and to do their own thing. So that's the end of the formal presentation, but what I would like to do is ask Ken to pop up as a Wave 1, just to give us a bit of a view in terms of, well, what was it like for you, Ken?
So there's something about why did we decide that we wanted to be a front runner? And the reason we wanted to be a front runner was because it just makes sense, everything that Dylan and Robert have just been talking about. I spent quite a number of years working in central government, and with the advent of Government Digital Service, the move towards open standards, pretty well versed in that. But when it comes to working in the health sector, what I identified was just the number of different applications that we have with our data sitting in silos. I was speaking with David Crichton from Doncaster just this morning, who's a GP, who sees somewhere in the region of 30 patients on a daily basis. And his need is to have access to information about patients at the point of care seamlessly. Our consultants who work in our A&E department, their need is to seamlessly see that information when they're dealing with tens of patients coming into the A&E department. They want that information in a way that they can readily consume it without having to go through multiple different systems. So that need is what's driving this initiative. So we wanted to be involved. We wanted to understand from the beginning what we had to do in terms of understanding those data structures. At a conceptual level, this works and the understanding is really straightforward, and we were given a lot of help from Robert and his team. When we got into the technical detail, to be honest, it was pretty hard going for the first number of weeks. The constructs around about the data messaging and the FHIR standards, it took us quite a bit of time to get our head around about that. But you know, it's like anything that you do that's new, it takes a while until you get used to it. So once we had started messaging the FHIR messages, we'd adopted the proxy, we went through some fairly rigorous testing. And I think that testing program, we've all learned a lot from going through that testing. And that's going to make it a lot easier for anybody else who comes along and starts on the onboarding process. So I think what my kind of key feedback would be, please engage with this. If you'd like to come to Doncaster, if you'd like to see what we've been doing, if you'd like to speak with any of the programmers in my team that have been working on this, you're more than welcome to do so.
Thanks for that,